Good evening, I'm Leah Hogg. Thank you for watching. Today would have marked the 100th birthday of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. Our programme is being aired from St Paul's Cathedral in Valletta, where we are waiting for Her Excellency Miss Katherine Ward, the British High Commissioner.
But as you can see, before it was one of the 8 auberges of the Knights of Malta. So they were German, and they occupied the whole of the site. And when Queen Adelaide, who coincidentally happened to be a German, decided that she wanted to build a church for the English community, it wasn't that difficult to decide on having the old auberge Allemand, which had lost, obviously it lost its knights. They went in 1798, and was only containing a few rooms that were being used by a civil servant from England. And so he gave up his rooms, and the whole of the auberge was knocked down. The only one that was, one was bombed during the Second World War, but most of them, like the one over there, the Aragonese auberge, were used. That was used for our bishop. That was the bishop's house for some years. And then just below us here is the Anglo-Bavarian auberge, vast. So there were 3 auberges in short distance from each other. I was just saying to the High Commissioner that he lived here with his wife, together as normal citizens. He was serving in the Royal Navy. She was a mother, or about to be a mother. And so his first connections were that they used to come here on Sundays for church, for the services. That's how he first came here in 1948, 47, 48. And he and she developed an association not just with the place, but with the people, with the mothers. That wasn't until 1964 when he came over here to preside over independence on behalf of the Queen, when the then Chancellor invited him to become the first friend, an initiative of his own, and he'd been connected ever since, and not just in a peripheral way. He was always deeply connected with all the NGOs, from environmental and academic and religious. The thing is that we hear so much about the faith of the Queen, but never about his faith. And if you, like me, are an aficionado of the series called The Crown on Netflix, some of which is very bad, but much of it is quite interesting, there's a whole episode devoted to his time when at Windsor he founded, with the Dean of Windsor, Robin, the College of St George, which is a very important, still functioning, 50 years on, very important interface between industry, commerce, academe, and the church. So he was actually, and his funeral, which was held, as you know, only a couple of months back, he devised it absolutely himself, with all the music and all the readings and everything that happened, because he was a Christian. Didn't make much about it, but he was. So after the Second World War, this was very much a military church.
One of the things that the Duke of Edinburgh is best known for in the world is the scheme he created, which is called the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which I was just hearing about today from the Maltese chairman of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, which is a fantastic scheme, in my view, which is about seeing the potential in young people and encouraging what I would describe as their holistic development. So it sees the person in the round, and the programme seeks to develop them physically, at whatever level they are. It seeks to develop their initiative and spirit of adventure, because there's a section of it which is about sort of going out into the wild and doing kind of having an adventure and having a series of tasks to complete. And there's a sense as well of developing young people's sense of integration into the community. And so part of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards as well, it relates to voluntary service. And so this programme apparently, so it was created I think in 1956, and in Malta the programme began in about 1965. And apparently there are 400 to 500 recipients of the award every year in Malta. And one of the lovely stories I heard about the Duke of Edinburgh today is that every single time he came to Malta, and he came here very frequently, he always set aside about 3 hours in his programme, and you know that the royal family tend to not be in any place any longer than a couple of days, but always 3 hours aside to spend time with the recipients of the Duke of Edinburgh Award in Malta, and to spend time with those young people because it was so important to him. And I think today would have been his 100th birthday. And so I think it's particularly appropriate today to talk about the future and his legacy. So I was really happy today to hear about how vibrant this programme is in Malta, and continues to be so. And today the Earl of Wessex, who Father Simon's just referred to, is apparently convening a Zoom conference with all the chairmans or women of the Duke of Edinburgh scheme worldwide, to celebrate the scheme and to celebrate this going forward. And I think that's a fantastic legacy.
I've met him about 4 times, I think. The first time was I was in the army, in the Territorial Army. After so many years, I received something called a Territorial Decoration, which is a royal gift, and normally just given by a mayor or a Lord Lieutenant of a county in England. It so happened that he was visiting the University of Cambridge, where I was based, and as our Chancellor, he came along and he gave me the gong himself. So that's the first time I met him, and at the party afterwards. Second time was at Windsor Castle, to do with the 40th anniversary of St George's House, when I saw him coming towards me carrying what certainly we weren't drinking. We were drinking champagne. I said, "Oh, sir, what's that?" He said, "It's a gin and tonic," and walked away like that. He was quite an eccentric individual. The other time I met the Duke of Edinburgh was when I went to Buckingham Palace as a late teenager to receive the Gold Award of the Duke of Edinburgh, which I did whilst I was in the Navy. The last time I saw him was here, so I've met him 4 times. And each time he was charming. I mean, he got the reputation of being a bit frank and asking direct questions. And he certainly did that of church people. I mean, on the Crown, there's this exchange between him and the Dean of Windsor. And he got all these clergy together, and Prince Philip was invited. And he really grilled them. You know, what are we doing here? Do we need this institution? You know, what's going on? Religion's dead.
As you know, I've just been here for a few months now, but apparently traditionally here in Malta, so as the Father Simon mentioned, there are sort of bronze, silver and gold awards. So I've been asked whether I would sort of hand out the awards and be involved in the ceremony for the silver awards, because the President does the gold ones, and the bronze ones, it's the Minister of Education. So I said I'd be delighted to do that. And I think more generally, the High Commission is receiving more funds from the British government so that we can try to be more involved in environmental work in Malta, because protecting the planet and against the impact of climate change, etc., and engaging youth more in that agenda is a key objective of the British government. As you know, we're hosting the next big climate summit in Glasgow in the autumn. And so all over the world, we want to be much more engaged with youth in protecting the planet and the environment. And so we very much hope to do that here in Malta. And so I hope with this particular award scheme that we'll be able to look at how we can engage more, including through the scheme, with environmental work in Malta.
The patronage of the Cathedral Friends, it will be the decision of the Prince of Wales as to which organisations that the Duke was associated with, which member of the royal family will now be associated with that organisation. It could be anything, but we're rather hoping for Prince Edward, the current Earl of Wessex. They've been here, you know. They came here, I met them, must be about 5 years ago. Both Sophie and Prince Edward, who I've met 2 or 3 times at Windsor, came here to bring ambulances for St John Ambulance.
Ah, nice.
They actually sort of came out on davits onto the wharf, because she is now the most senior member of the royal family, other than the Queen, being the sovereign head, as a member of the order.
Malta Post has issued today 3 commemorative stamps in memory of the Duke of Edinburgh and his particular connection with Malta on what would have been his 100th birthday, which I think is rather a beautiful gesture. And I understand there are 3 separate stamps, and 2 of them have got photographs which relate to the Duke of Edinburgh and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's time living at Villa Guardamangia. And the third stamp apparently commemorates the Duke of Edinburgh handing over the independence documents in 1964. So I think it's rather a beautiful tribute from Malta, and it's fitting because there is a special connection, I believe, between the Duke of Edinburgh and Her Majesty the Queen and Malta, relating to the time when he headed a ship here, and Malta is the only country in the world where the Queen has lived apart from the United Kingdom.
When Prince Philip was here in 2015 in November, we dedicated this picture of the Prime Minister. It was the 50th anniversary of his death, and so that was a good opportunity because this, as you can see, was a memorial lectern to Winston Churchill, and this was one of the stages on our little walk around. And then we've got a coin commemorating his funeral here.
Yeah, beautiful.
Royal Air Force there, and that's Canadian. There's the Royal Marines, and this is the Army device. There's his shipwrecked bark, there's the fire that greeted him and the crew, and there's the Viper. So we're quite pleased with those, they're really rather nice.
Beautiful.
They are nice, they're works of art as well as devotional pieces. When Her Majesty passes away and Prince Charles becomes the king, all his titles, all the titles, go. And he is at present the Duke of Edinburgh because his father's title passed to him. He is the Duke of Edinburgh, I mean, amongst his other titles, Lord of the Isles and blah, blah, blah. When he becomes king, all those titles are up for grabs and they can be directed to anybody he wants. So it is thought that Prince Edward will become the Duke of Edinburgh. For the last 10 years, he's been at the top of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme.
Earlier today, Her Majesty the Queen commemorated the occasion by planting a rose named for the late Duke of Edinburgh in the gardens of Windsor Castle. A contribution from the sale of each rose will benefit the Duke of Edinburgh's Award Living Legacy Fund.
It was with great sadness that a short time ago I received word from Buckingham Palace that His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh has passed away at the age of 99. Prince Philip earned the affection of generations here in the United Kingdom, across the Commonwealth and around the world. He was the longest serving consort in history, one of the last surviving people in this country to have served in the Second World War, at Cape Matapan, where he was mentioned in dispatches for bravery, and in the invasion of Sicily.
The Prime Minister made rather a beautiful statement on hearing of the passing away of the Duke of Edinburgh. And one of the most lovely comments that he relayed was a comment by Her Majesty the Queen on her gold wedding anniversary, in which she said that the Duke of Edinburgh's contribution to the United Kingdom was much more than the British people would ever know, or more than he would ever personally have taken credit for. So I thought that was rather a beautiful statement, which encapsulated the importance of the legacy of the Duke of Edinburgh to the United Kingdom and the British people.
Windsor Castle is hosting an exhibition to commemorate the remarkable life and legacy of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh. Items on display will include the Prince's early life as a naval officer and his role as the longest-serving consort in British history.
One of the things that struck me most reading and learning about Malta is just that so much of Malta's history, obviously, is bound up with what I'd describe as its strategic location, with all sorts of different countries and actors seeking to gain interest in Malta because of its strategic location. The Duke of Edinburgh, as you know, because of his career in the Navy, very distinguished career in the Navy, but his happiest moments, I believe, in that career and most senior positions held at that time were in Malta. So there's a special connection between the Duke of Edinburgh and the seas and the British Navy, and that is a very special part of Malta's history as well. So I guess, I'd encapsulate it again in the sense that there's a very special connection between the British royal family and Malta, and at the centre of that connection is the Duke of Edinburgh. The thing that struck me the most is to what extent the cathedral is also seeped in British history and the British connection with Malta in all sorts of different ways, including the royal family's connection with Malta, because Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, when they lived in Malta, when the Duke was not at sea, this is the church in which they worshipped. So there's a very special connection here, and there is so much here which tells the story of the UK's connection with Malta, and that's rather beautiful.
Thank you very much for watching our broadcast today from St. Paul's Pro Cathedral in Valletta. I'd like to thank Her Excellency Miss Katherine Ward, the British High Commissioner, and the Very Reverend Canon Simon Godfrey, Chancellor of St. Paul's Pro Cathedral. Should you have any questions or comments, please do send them to the number that appears on the screen. I'm Hogg for Net TV. I wish you a good evening.